Welcome to another episode of the Edmonds Moms Room podcast. This series that we're doing is all about birth stories. And so it's extremely near and dear to my heart. It's vulnerable. We're going to tell you guys some really cool stories, and I hope that they inspire you. And so let's just get right to it. Today I have Christina on the podcast. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Allison.
Yeah. Oh, Christina, I don't even know where to start. So I'll give you a little background. So we started working together really through your preconception journey.
Yep.
So you knew that you had wanted to get pregnant and had started working out with a trainer who really focused on preconception, pregnancy, and postpartum. And that trainer referred you to me. And that's really how we got connected. I got to work with you in your preconception journey with your first pregnancy.
Yes, and it was not very long because my daughter was conceived within like the first or second month of trying.
Exactly.
Very fortunate. So yeah, but then we continued working together throughout my pregnancy and now in my postpartum.
Yeah, how lovely. So we've been on a journey together. It's really special to me. I cherish our relationship. We're obviously friends now. And so I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story.
Yeah.
So a little bit about what our journey looked like initially. We don't have to focus on the preconception journey. I think that is an important thing to focus, but this is really about the birth story podcast. So let's focus on what it looked like, what you did during your first pregnancy, how you educated yourself. And I'll drive in a little bit about like what we did prenatally to help prepare your body for birth. But if you want to just tell us a few things that you were important during your first pregnancy, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, you bet. So, I'd known, I think since I was a very little girl that I wanted to be a mom. Not everybody obviously has those thoughts, but for me, it was always something that I was very, very into. And so I thought about birth probably more than the average person. I thought about having children. I was always very fascinated in birth. So when my husband and I agreed that it was, time for us to have children, we obviously we're very lucky, like I said, in conception, and we got pregnant within a couple months, and then it was like, oh, this is real. I need to figure out what I'm doing, and how to even go about this thing that at the time was really scary to me. And so for me, the first thing that I really focused on was kind of getting my body in alignment with my head. So I'm a person living in a larger body. I've been told my whole life that getting pregnant would take forever, that being pregnant would be horrible, that my weight and some of my developmental issues, my reproductive organ issues would cause these just huge problems, and that I would probably require emergency C-section, or all these things that had filled my head for so many years that I think many birthing people are told, or in one way or another. And so my first course of action was to try and get rid of those, and that really was done by surrounding myself with people who were in agreement that larger bodies could birth with ease, could have beautiful, normal, uneventful, minimal to no intervention births. And so I started seeking out people specific care providers who specifically stated that they were either fat friendly, or they worked with people in larger bodies, or I had a recommendation from someone who I trusted. And so I got working with a personal trainer who really helped me focus on getting in touch with my body, and being kind of just like so in awe of it and proud of it, and ready, in alignment with it, so that I could take on this journey. And then of course I started physical therapy even before that with you, and we hit it off right away because we started talking about fat birthing bodies, and I was like, yes, I'm at home. And then I kind of went on my search for my care provider, and so for me, assembling a team first and foremost that was gonna take care of me, fill the gaps that I didn't know, and also help me learn how to believe that my body could get through this journey. That was my number one priority. And then from there, I just kind of explored, in the internet world, which can be great and scary all at the same time, to kind of, see what pregnancy, birth, and subsequently some education, childbirth education would be like. That's kind of how I started.
Oh, I love that. You know, I wish everyone had that education when they start their pregnancy. How important that is just beyond belief. Being able to break down those mental barriers. What I see a lot of times is people will take on the birth stories of their moms.
Yeah.
So, if their mom had a C-section, they're like, well, my mom had a C-section or my grandma did. And so I'm just bound to have that, where my mom had a really terrible birth and I'm just going to have that,
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of generational trauma around birth. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people are very keen and eager to share birth trauma with other people, even if they didn't ask. And so, combine that with the media, all we really have, unless you've been fortunate to be in like a family who has had births, that have gone well, right? All we really have are these horror stories about our own births or the births of like our cousins or our brothers and sisters, or random people who come up to you and tell you how bad their birth was. So I that's a side note. We need more support for people who are birthing, but that's a different conversation. So, I think getting around the fear that has been instilled in us by these birth stories, by the media, by this dramatic television birth that we're all like so ingrained to believe is the one way everyone births, right? I think for me, getting that fear out of my head and really understanding a lot of different ways birth could go, it could look, how I could deliver, interventions, no interventions, just really being prepared to encounter a variety of scenarios, including really wonderful, positive, happy, easy, birth stories. So for me, that was definitely key to get rid of that fear.
Yeah. Lovely. Oh, so beautiful and powerful. So do you mind sharing a little bit about your PT journey during pregnancy? And if you don't recall, I'll share some too.
Yeah. So, I know when we first started, obviously I had this held belief that it was going to take me a really long time to get pregnant because that's what all my doctors had said. So I was like, okay, I'm going to tackle this pelvic floor physical therapy. I heard it was great to get in, kind of get the work in before you become pregnant. And then bam, I was pregnant. And so then it was like, all of a sudden we shifted to pregnancy care. And, for me, obviously we did pelvic floor physical therapy, which I wasn't, really aware of until I saw you. And then we also, you also consistently helped me with some of the problem areas for me during pregnancy: hips, back, neck, and just as my body grew and changed and shifted, helped me kind of understand what changes were happening in my body and how I could protect myself, protect my joints, protect my, the way I walk, how I move, to really try and maximize kind of pain-free moments. And then I had pubic symphysis in the last couple, I think it was the last month or so of pregnancy. And so lots of education from you and your team around, how to sit, how to get in and out of cars, how to roll over in bed. And then of course some, supports with the belt and stuff, just to stay as pain-free as possible. And then I saw you like 2 days before my birth because I was like, I'm in so much pain, I need your help. And you came to my house and you helped me get comfortable in bed. And and then baby girl came 2 days later. So
that was a day you were in labor, you were in early phases of labor, and we got to do some nice techniques to really help things move. So that was lovely. Some of the other things that we did as far as like the actual pelvic floor preparation was opening up all the layers of the pelvic floor. So one thing that is important to know is that a lot of people will tell you to start doing perineal massage around 32 weeks. And that is great and good and can be beneficial. But so much of the tightness within the pelvis a lot of times resides in the third layer, which is the deepest layer of the pelvic floor. And a lot of times when the pelvic floor is tight on those layers, it's really hard for the baby to descend past that third layer. And so that's where a lot of births can get stuck, or, if things turn a different direction, a lot of times it can just be because simply the muscle couldn't relax or couldn't open. And so
that's right. I forgot about all the visualizations and the talks that we had about releasing pelvic floor and not keeping it tight, and how you would make me laugh, because that was at the end, it was like the only way I could get it to release was through laughter. Yeah, I forgot all about that.
But those are just some side notes of like really what we did to help progress your pelvic floor. We also looked at some different birthing positions
Yep.
that would help you relax your pelvic floor in those different positions. So now comes the juicy part. I think you did all this work prenatally. I think it helps tremendously with postpartum healing. I think you're a good example of that. Your core came back to you really quickly.
Yeah.
And that has to do with the blood flow that you created during pregnancy by doing the, internal pelvic floor work, by really focusing on opening your pelvis up during pregnancy, but also keeping your muscles strong to support your joints. So you did all that work. And I think that really helped transform your postpartum experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
had a really wonderful postpartum experience. I had minimal bleeding, minimal cramping, minimal pain. I really was back to not normal, but I was back to like, a comfortable, like normal day-to-day activities within 6 weeks easily, if not even before then. And then, it was only a couple of months before I was able to resume things that, like walking and working out with my trainer. So
awesome. Cool. Thank you for sharing. So now comes the juicy part. Tell us about the actual birth, whatever you're willing to share. We already said that you were in birth for 2 days before you actually delivered. So tell us about it.
Yeah. So I woke up, I think it was a Saturday. I was feeling kind of crampy, but like obviously never had birth before. So it was like, I don't know what this is. It's probably just the baby moving around down there. So I spent the day walking around the mall with my family, ate my way through the food court. At the time, my husband and I were super into Pokemon Go. So we were playing outside. It was really great. I was very privileged and fortunate to have, I took the week off before my due date. So I'd been home, I'd been resting, I've been nesting, I've been preparing for her to come. And so Saturday night, started definitely feeling some cramping and was like, okay, I think this may be starting. I'm not an expert here, but this feels like something I've never experienced before. And they say, when you know, and I just like didn't believe that until it actually happened to me. And then I got, that super like initial rush of like, oh, here we go. Like baby's going to be here. And like, kind of that like adrenaline, like you got to run around and like get everything done. But really it was super like chill. It wasn't dramatic. We ate dinner. I was able to do most of my normal activities for the next day or so. What I now know were, early contractions and my uterus, getting prepped for the actual act of labor and delivery. It was pretty calm for the first 24 hours. And then they started to pick up in intensity. I started to not be able to sleep, or really like lay down or rest for any long period of time, without them reminding me, the contractions reminding me that they were there and present. So I used, I had a midwife and I had a home birth. And so I called my midwife and said, hey, I think I'm in labor. I'm not really sure when you should come. I don't know how any of this works, but there's definitely some movement going on. And I could feel my whole abdomen just get really tight, and like physically you could see it kind of tighten and then it would relax in a contraction. And so I was like, something is definitely happening. So she listened to me labor on the phone. She was like, I think you're okay. I don't think we need to come yet. Just try and get as much rest as you can, take a shower, get some sleep, eat some food, do all the things to take care of yourself like you normally would. So I said, okay. We hung up the phone. I was like, oh gosh, okay, what's going on? I don't know how long this is going to be. Things definitely started to pick up in intensity. I still couldn't sleep. And for me, it was getting pretty intense. So I think this was like 36 hours or so after kind of contractions had started. So early morning, woke up and was my husband's name. I was like, I can't do this on my own anymore. We need to call the doula. Like I need some support. So he goes out into the living room and finishes working, and I call the doula, and she's like, okay, I'll be right over. So she gets there at like maybe 5 a.m. She helps me kind of through some of the next contractions, called the midwife again. She listened to me labor. She's like, no, I still think, you're okay. But let's, we'll pack up our stuff and get there just in case. So they got there, and I just spent a lot of time like walking up and down the hallway, rocking and swaying. It was springtime, so I had the windows open, listening to like birds, anything to like kind of distract myself from when the contractions hit. I thought I would want like music, and I thought I would want like people, and I didn't. I was kind of very introverted. I was like, leave me alone and like listen to the birds. Like, which is so not my personality, but it was what I wanted in that moment. So when the midwives got there, she kind of listened to me go through a contraction, and she's like, well, your intensity doesn't seem too bad. And I was like, in my head, I was like, oh my gosh, like this is not too bad. Like, what are you talking about? So we just, they set up their equipment. I honestly don't even know what was happening at this time, because I was totally focused on just getting through each contraction. And, for people who haven't birthed, and, I know everyone's experiences are different, but for me, contractions weren't painful. They were just like this really intense tightening that I couldn't like do anything but focus on them in the moment. It took all of my like effort and energy and willpower to like keep breathing through them and like be really like cognizant. So I definitely at that point was like thinking, wow, this is not as bad as people like as I thought it was going to be. This concept of like I've worked up birth in my head to be so dramatic. And then the midwife asked if she could do a check of my cervix, and it turns out I was almost 8 centimeters dilated at that point. And so everyone was very shocked. No one thought that I was that far along, and I think that's just really attributed to the tremendous amount of prep work I did to cope with labor and be present, and physically and also mentally. I feel like I was super prepared for this birth. And when those contractions came, I just had a space. I had a space that I went to in my head. I had affirmations that I'd listened to my whole pregnancy that I went back to. I had visualizations. I fell into this really interesting breathing pattern that I think only my husband to this day can replicate, because he said it was so intense and was just listening to me the whole time. And then, from there, things really picked up. So that was like 9 o'clock in the morning. Midwives got there, checked me. And then I was like, can I please get in the tub? Because at that point I was like, I need some other sort of pain relief that's not just, my own self or, holding on to someone. And so I got into the birth tub, which they'd set up in my bedroom, and it was like so warm and wonderful. And I was able to, the first time, like kind of just have my body relax. So water's always been really relaxing and nurturing for me. And it was almost kind of like, well, it did, not almost. It just kind of took the weight off of everything. It took the pressure off of everything. I was able to just relax for a few minutes, even though my contractions were definitely picking up at that point. And then time kind of got away from me. So I don't know the sequence of events or how long things took, but then I started really getting into that active labor where things were really intense. There was no break in between my contractions, virtually no break. And I got to the point where I was like, which I think is very common, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, if this takes any longer, I think I said, like, if this gets any harder, I'm not going to be able to do it. And my midwives were like, no, that means we're at transition. Like, that's usually the hardest part, is when you feel like you can't go on anymore. And then sure enough, I transitioned into pushing. And then things were a blur. So I had a 7-minute second stage labor. So I had 3 kind of involuntary pushes. I didn't do any active coaching or active pushing where people, encouraged me to push. It was just, we transitioned and I said, I'm pushing. And then I said, she's coming. And then she was here on the third push. So it was definitely a whirlwind once we got into active labor, and she was born at home in call. So my water never my waters never actually ruptured. So she was born in her amniotic sac. which I guess is super rare. And we didn't get a picture of it. And I'm so sad because I would have loved to have seen what it looked like. But yeah, she was born safely at home, and me and my husband and the midwife and our student midwife was wonderful, was actually the one who caught her. And yeah, so that's kind of how my labor went.
Awesome. Oh, thank you so much for sharing. That is so wonderful. I also remember when you originally told me, I remember when you told me the story, you, like, everyone was distracted and not really focused on you. And I remember you saying, I had to tell everybody the baby was coming out
Yeah,
now.
yeah. Because I think, obviously there was a little bit of like shock when the midwives got there, because I even talked to my midwife not too long ago, and she was like, yeah, I think I even told the other midwife, like, we're going to be here a while. Like, she's pretty early. And so like, no one was really prepared. Like, they didn't quite have their gloves on yet. Like I hadn't put the sheet on the bed yet, like it just, we were thinking it was going to be a bit. And then yeah, I transitioned, and they were like, okay, you're probably going to get a little bit of a reprieve here for maybe like 30 minutes. We can rest, and then we'll go into the pushing phase. And I was like, no, there's no break. Like I'm pushing, like, and, I'd heard some people, and this is, maybe gross for some people, but I'd heard people in my birth class, some of the birth educators describe involuntary pushing as kind of like you're throwing up, but like downward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very accurate description. Like, if I could describe it, like, there was no control over it. Like, I didn't need to be told to push, which I like always thought was a thing. I always thought you had to be like coached through pushing, because that's what we see. But no, my body was like, okay, here we go. And I couldn't have stopped if I wanted to. Like, I think on push 3, she was like, okay, let's slow it down a little bit. Can you not push? And I was like, not push? No, there's literally no controlling this. Like, she is coming out right now. And she did. So she did not want to be inside any longer.
Oh, oh my goodness. I love it. I love it. It's the best story ever. And then of course I kind of live for your texts after birth. Like, it's just those things I don't forget, and you just wake up to your text, and it's just amazing. So,
Yeah.
oh yeah. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I think that I want to do this series really because I want people to know that they can prepare for birth. I
Yeah.
want them to know that it can be a positive experience, and they can decide that this is going to be an easy experience,
Yeah.
or there's
Yeah.
going to be ease around my pregnancy. There's going to be ease around my birth and labor, the actual delivery aspect of things. And it doesn't have to be this huge traumatic event of
Yeah.
7 people holding your legs up in the air trying to get this baby out, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, definitely. And right, there obviously, we all know there obviously are instances like that. And that's where we're like super thankful for Western medicine and all the things that we can do to save, baby and the birthing parent. But, yeah, like, it doesn't have to be like that. And I think for a lot of people, it can be avoided. And I think that, addressing that fear, educating yourself, envision, I know it sounds kind of dorky or silly, but like envisioning the kind of labor that you want, and and being prepared for, obviously, if it doesn't go that way, right? It's not about naive, toxic positive thinking, right? But being prepared if something else should happen. But yeah, I focused so much on the birth I wanted to have. I listened to positive birth stories. I drew boundaries when people would try and talk to me in the grocery store or give me unsolicited information about their horrible birth, and I would say, no thank you, I'm not interested in hearing that at this time. Like, I really tried to create in my brain, in my personal space, just someplace that I felt so safe and so true to myself, that like I knew that there was no other way that this baby could be born except in the exact way, that I wanted. And right, it's not, I don't mean way as in like I predicted, or I like was like, she needs to come at this time and this is how she's going to come, but just like the feelings that I wanted to have around having a baby. And, that's one of the reasons why I chose a home birth, which was a hugely controversial decision, not only within my marriage, but also pretty much anybody I told, they were like, are you crazy? You can't have a home birth. It's so unsafe. And it's actually just as safe, if not safer, for low risk people, for low risk births. And I have a lot of trauma around hospitals, and So for me, like the idea of being in a hospital was like, things are going to just go wrong, like, because I would be so scared and so anxious. And so I took all of that away by deciding to do it at my home, where I felt the most secure and the most held. And I think that contributed to just increased oxytocin, just like a lot of loving vibes and like ease of just being, so at peace. And then, I could hop right into my bed after she was born and take a nap, and we didn't have to go anywhere. We didn't have to worry about the car seat until our first pediatrics visit. There's a lot of perks of being at home. Someone, I think, made me a grilled cheese sandwich right afterwards and like fed it to me in bed. So like, there's some perks for being at home, other than just, being, some people called me, a hippie or alternative or whatever. And, so it worked for my family and myself.
Oh, I love hearing that. I love hearing the story. I think it's important because it is a decision that a lot of people have to make with their partners. It was a decision that I decided if I was going to have a third baby, that is what was going to happen. And my husband was just going to have to be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
Thankfully, COVID opened the door to hospitals not being as safe. So he was more open to it. And that's a blessing, from that experience. But
it's a really tough conversation. I mean, I think we started with the transition to a birth center. Yep. And then once we got comfortable with the birth center, and for both of us, right? I honestly, when I thought about my birth, I never considered home birth at all in the beginning. I was like, birth center, I don't want to be in a hospital, but I need to be someplace else, right? Like home birth wasn't even an option. And then as I did more research, I interviewed midwives. I really asked, like, what's the difference? Like, is it safe to be at home? I don't know much. How do I educate myself? And the only real difference is that some birth centers are allowed to have some forms of oxygen, or not oxygen, nitrous, I believe, if they're licensed in Washington. But other than that, the midwife comes to your house with the whole kit of oxygen, of drugs. They're trained in infant resuscitation, infant support, postpartum hemorrhaging, right? All the things that could potentially go wrong. They're trained in, they're educated in, they're practiced in. So really at the end of the day, I learned for me that it was the best option for me, and still really safe for my low risk, pregnancy. And I'm, was 6 minutes from a hospital in case anything did happen. I felt really confident and comfortable that we could get someplace to get help, urgently if we needed to.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for sharing around that decision.
My husband was not on board. And, in the end, he said, and, I'm very thankful for this. He said, it's, you're the one who's going to actively be birthing this baby. And if you feel the most safe at home, I'm not going to stand in your way. He's like, I'm going to have to get comfortable with it. Like, I'm not really okay with this decision, but, I know it's really important to you. Mm-hmm. And so that really, it was like the first time in a long time in our relationship where we didn't agree. And I felt so much guilt around it being like the birth of our child. We didn't agree on the location. And eventually he came around, and he, after it happened, he was like, that was such a good decision. I was so comfortable. You were so comfortable. But we didn't agree in the beginning. So I would say to anyone who's listening, who's maybe thinking about this or having that conversation with your significant other, like, it's okay if you don't agree at first, and to really have them talk with the midwife or care provider if they have questions too, because I think once we both got the facts, we that conversation changed. But it was a journey for sure. I don't think he was on board until like month 8.5, and then she was here, and then he was really happy we did it. So
yeah. Oh, I'd love to hear that. Thank you for sharing. I find myself, I'm telling my own stories here, but I find myself being really selective, honestly, who I'm telling that I'm having a home birth here. And, I'm not just shouting it from the rooftops because I don't want people's stories, or opinions, so I think that is important, when you come up with wherever you decide to have the birth, just to be okay with that. And like, it's okay you can have a low intervention birth at the hospital as well.
Yep, that's true.
And be extremely prepared for that. And
Yeah,
so,
and some people, right? Like I had such a strong connection to my house and like safety. Some people don't have that. And it's also a privilege to be able to birth at home, right? Like we
yeah,
own our home, it was big enough, right? Like we're not renting, we're not in a small apartment. Like there are a lot of physical capabilities that keep people from that option as well. So it's not actually an option for everyone.
yeah,
And like you said, there are so many ways that you can work with your provider and your care team in an OB setting, in a hospital setting, or a birth center in a hospital, even to have that kind of same vibe, low lights, candles, music. Well, not candles in the hospital, but they let you do the electric ones,
yeah,
music, right? Curtains drawn, limited people, right? There's so many ways that you can mimic that vibe. You just have to ask for it or work with your providers, to
yeah,
get there. So
yeah,
that's the education piece, right? Like this is a
exactly.
journey of 9 months of like just constantly feeling like you have no idea what you're doing. And then the
Totally.
baby gets here and you feel that way still, but
Yeah,
just educating yourself, like you've never gone through something like this. Your body's never experienced it, your mind's never experienced it. So, asking questions to the right people, and like you said, being willing to draw that line of like,
yeah,
no, I don't want to talk about this, with this person, or
yes.
you're starting a conversation that it makes me feel really uncomfortable. Can you please, can we please not talk about this anymore?
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. The reason, just for listeners, the reason that you're talking about having low lights, having candles, having soothing things around you and being comfortable is really to stimulate have your body be in a parasympathetic nervous system response, which is really your relaxation, your rest and digest response. This is also the reason that Christina decided to take a week off before she delivered or before her due date, was to really allow her body to get into that parasympathetic nervous system state so she could relax. A lot of times what we see, and a lot of people go overdue, especially their first pregnancy. And when you work up until your due date, you're still ramped up. Your sympathetic nervous system is still taking over. You're still having stress responses. And what we see is, like, if you're in those stress responses, your body is going to have a very hard time cascading into natural labor, because it's as if from an evolutionary standpoint, if a tiger was chasing you, your body would not feel that it's safe for you to birth this baby, so you would hold this baby inside. And so it is really important, from a nervous system perspective, to be in that like relaxed state throughout your entire labor,
Yeah.
really. And I believe for 1 to 2 weeks prior to labor, I
Yeah.
usually tell clients 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But here it's hard because people don't want to eat into their maternity leave or parental leave.
Yeah.
Um, but
Yeah.
I think, Washington's doing a little bit better of a job with it. But it is hard because you want to be able to spend your postpartum time as much as you can with your baby. And a
Yeah.
lot of people are working parents now.
Yep.
So
Yeah. And I was fortunate enough to have some vacation time that I took ahead of time. And then once my daughter was born, then I, activated the FMLA leave, the Family Medical Leave Act leave. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think that greatly contributed to, right. And I think it's also tied to the topic of fear, right? Like I wasn't afraid in labor. I wasn't afraid of what was happening. I didn't know what was coming next, but I wasn't at any point afraid. Like I knew that I was safe. I knew that my midwives and my midwifery team was there to keep me safe. My husband was there, whom I feel very, safe with, hopefully. But right, I had my whole team, I had my whole vibe, and I knew that no matter what happened, even if I did need intervention, even if I did need transfer, even if I did need a C-section, right, those things could still happen and I could still be safe because I was, being cared for in the utmost, respect. And there were definitely a few times, especially around transition, I think about that and think, I got scared for a minute because I didn't know what was happening, is the fear of the unknown. And then I was able to, find my breath. My husband was able to help me. My doula was able to help me find my breath, get back to my, patterned breathing that really helped me stay kind of focused. And I think that collective like mindset and physical relaxation are what helped me so easily produce enough oxytocin to get things going, and to be so relaxed that it wasn't a fight. And the other thing that I can say that I definitely worked on really hard, and you don't really get to practice contractions before they actually happen, but one of the things that that really helped me was not to fight against them, like was to educate myself about what was actually happening in my body when a contraction was happening, that it's
Yes.
actually just two muscles moving over themselves to help your body, like, you know, work on that motion to push baby down and push baby down and push baby down. And visualizing that, like knowing that that is what my body was doing in a contraction, helps me not be afraid of it, like, and helped me not tense against it, but instead just kind of be with it. And that, I think, dramatically changed. You know, I wasn't like, oh pain, oh pain, oh pain. I was like, oh, okay, my body's doing its job, let's breathe into this, let's help it, you know, push my baby down. And that visualization for me was one of the most powerful to get through an unmedicated birth.
Yeah, lovely. I think that is so important. That's what we work on with anyone who comes in through the door pregnant. You know, we really work on that diaphragm, helping push on the top of the uterus. So, you know, during a contraction, you're doing your deep breathing and you're not bracing against it. And then you're also allowing the pelvic floor to open during those contractions. And that just helps things stay open so baby can come out through the birth canal.
Yep.
Like it was meant to do.
Yep.
So, yeah, just lovely. Oh, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I think you're going to inspire a lot of people, and I'm very grateful for it.
Yeah. And, you know, don't be afraid to ask questions. That's what I did every step of the way. And if you still don't understand something, keep asking, keep finding people, you know, ask different people until you get someone who will give you, you know, the time to explain the things you're, you know, that might be causing fear or anxiety or unknown, because once those go away, I really, truly believe there's nothing stopping you.
Yeah. Yeah. Fantastic. Oh, thank you so much.
You're so
That
welcome.
was
Thank you.
beautiful, 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 beautiful. Much appreciated.
The Edmonds Moms Room podcast is brought to you by Body Motion Physical Therapy. We help women through pregnancy and beyond so they can live active, confident, and healthy lives.